Hello and welcome to another special Thursday on Viking Television. I am Anne Diamond and it's my weekly pleasure and privilege to introduce you to someone fascinating and special, and also someone you might well meet one day when you take a Viking cruise. Today you would have to be visiting Ireland, and that's where I'm going to transport you virtually until we can all travel freely again and meet people and experience places in person. In Britain, we have a very popular TV series called Who Do You Think You Are? In it, well-known people, with the help of expert genealogists, trace their family tree and often come up with shocking, heartwarming, and certainly often tear-jerking discoveries about the people in their family who came before them. It's such a popular TV format that it's spawned many international copies. There's a version in Poland, Canada, Australia, Germany, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and yes, a very popular version in the United States too. What the original producers discovered when they first invented it was our human fascination for genealogy, our curiosity about where we came from and what that makes us. Well, my next guest doesn't actually need a TV programme to tell him his background. He knows already, because his line is clearly defined right back to Elizabethan times and counts a prominent prime minister in the family. It's a family tree of which to be fiercely proud, of course. But just imagine what it must be like knowing that one day, as eldest son, you will inherit not just an amazing family tradition, but the land and buildings that go with it. And those buildings, though historic and important, are utterly dilapidated and crumbling before your eyes. That's quite a millstone around anyone's neck. However, today's special guest stepped up to the challenge with the courage and sense of duty you might expect of a distinguished family, and turned a crumbling inheritance into a thing of awesome beauty. Just look at this amazing place. It's called Colebrook Park, set in 1,000 acres of ravishing Irish countryside. Have a look at this. Earlier, I was trying to think of a word to describe that place because it really, it just makes you want to go and stay there. And I thought of the word divine. It looks divine. And do you know, one day you may be able to go and stay there, do just that, perhaps as an extension to a Viking cruise. Not worked out yet, but it may be possible. Time now, though, first to introduce the man who inherited it and breathed into it a new life. Alan Henry Brooke, the 3rd Viscount Brookeborough, Knight of the Garter, Knight of St John, and Lord-in-Waiting to the Queen. Lord Brookeborough, welcome. It's lovely to see you.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Please say Alan. I can't work otherwise.
I will definitely call you Alan from now on. Thank you very much. I love your house. It is, as I said, divine. When you decided to move in, did it look anything like that?
Well, it looked like that from the outside, but inside there was absolutely nothing, because my grandfather died in 1973 and the whole place was hit by death duties. And that meant the sale of all the animals, all the farm machinery and the contents of the house. A small part went to my parents. And so it was just bare walls. And on the outside, it looked like that, and it was okay. But it was when you got inside that you met a few problems.
And so what did your father ever move in?
No, I didn't quite get that, but I think you said, did my father move in? No, my father didn't move in because we lived in a dower house called Ashbrook down the other end, and I'd never even slept a night in Coburg. And when we got married, or in fact, just before we got married, we were going to stay in a cottage, and that was really going to be it. And then one night I was talking to my parents and we suddenly said, well, why don't we do something with Coburg, because there's nothing for it. So I rang up Janet 3 weeks before we got married. And I said, listen, I know you're making small curtains for small windows, but how about moving into Coburg? And that's a bit different. So we sort of swallowed it and we moved in.
So the choice was that either you stay in the dower house, Ashbrook, which we'll talk about later, and watch Colebrook crumble, or take on this enormous challenge and hugely expensive challenge of actually trying to make something of the big house itself. What did your wife think? I know she's very much the interior designer, isn't she? But still, what an enormous challenge.
Yes, the first thing is we were actually going to live in a cottage at the bottom of the walled garden because my parents were in Ashbrook. But yes, she was quite horrified by it because she is the brains and the everything behind the designs of what we've got and what we've done. And in fact, she made every set of curtains herself, which is 101 sets on the floor of the drawing room where there was no furniture. And we did it up little bit by little bit. Before we moved in, we just painted 2 bedrooms and did the kitchen up. And then we didn't finish doing it for 20 years because the far side of the house hadn't been used for 50 years. And everything, the ceilings were down and whatever. So we did it up bit by bit. When we had a few people to stay and when we got enough money just to do up a bit more, we did. And the day we got to the other side, it was really amazing. I mean, we almost cried. We never thought we would. And that was that. It wasn't going to happen, but it did happen.
So the idea was to do it up room by room, as you say. In the meantime, getting your income from what? Whom?
Well, the first thing we got any income from was we have sika deer here, which is the Japanese sika deer, which were imported in the 1860s. So we had a couple of people, because we only had a couple of spare bedrooms, to shoot deer. And the only people who come here really in the troubles were the Germans, because they shot all over the world in troublesome areas. And they came and shot. But we didn't really even have carpet on their floor. And the only reason that you knew they got up in the middle of the night was because they probably had a splinter in their toe, literally. And they came and they started shooting a few deer. And the income from that, then we were able to have a few more people. Then we were able to do up 2 more rooms. Then we needed more seating, so we did have a drawing room. And then we needed more rooms. So it's just crept on corridor by corridor.
I must say, we ought to show everybody, because we have an international audience watching right now, where exactly you are. And we have a map of Northern Ireland, or of Ireland actually, and if you look at the little red dot, you will actually be able to see that is where you are. And you are in Northern Ireland, and you mentioned the troubles there, and I don't know whether I've ever thought before. I mean, I lived as a journalist through the troubles, and everybody reported on them, and people worldwide would have seen the troubles on the news. You never actually thought of the way it must have affected every other industry, tourism in particular, and every other person's well-being and welfare throughout the whole of Ireland, actually, certainly throughout the whole of Northern Ireland. I don't think we ever thought of that, but the troubles clearly affected you and your family and the whole heritage of keeping the place together.
Yes, but it also, I mean, we had a filling station at the end of the avenue, and it was something my father did, and it was one of the first filling stations, this was in 1970, to actually provide food, and that was blown up by the terrorists, and we never reopened it because it was Cobra. It would be blown up, and so that wasn't reopened, but it was, everybody was in it together, and it was life. It was just the life we learned. I left the army, left the regular army, I came back. I then joined the security forces here. And then when I got married, Janet joined them as well. And my mother was in the reserve police, and my brother was in the army, and another sister was in the reserve police, and one of them in the other security force. But it was just a daily thing. It was a way of life, but we couldn't, if we wanted to, turn Cobra into a hotel, because it would have just been a target every day of the week. But life was not terrible. It was a life we lived. And all our soldiers and all our policemen and everybody else were at equal risk. So everybody was there together. And by being involved a bit in the fight against terrorism, you at least had some idea who might walk around the corner and do something to you, where rather than being in the dark and not knowing what's going on. But it was the way things were. And so we developed Cobra to take that into account by not opening it up completely because of security. And that we would open it up bit by bit to people.
Exactly, but that obviously affected your long-term plan for Colebrook because it limited the income. But I mean, it is the most amazing. I said it was ravishing Irish countryside, and it really is. It's the most beautiful spot you're in. And Colebrook itself is absolutely gorgeous. We've got lots of pictures of Colebrook, and we'll go through them and see them. But it is. Can you describe the house, what it looks like, and the deer park around it, and everything? How would you describe it to people?
Well, some people have described it in books as being a barrack block. It is a large house. It is a large house, but it has a part of the house which was part of the original house, which was built between 1641 and 1700, which is smaller rooms on the south side. Then in 1824, there was this big race to build bigger houses, and for several reasons, because they wanted to entertain, because there were no airplanes and no cars, so people came to stay for much longer. There was no such thing as coming for a night. They came for a couple of weeks. And it's bad enough having your relations for more than 3 days, and most people understand that. But to have people for 3 weeks was a lot. So they built these big rooms and so on, so that they could keep the guests up there. And of course, they froze in cold times because there was only a little tiny fire in each room. But that was in a race for big houses, and it was probably a race to see who'd go broke first. And a lot of people did just by building. And then, of course, the house was only of real use for about 100 years, because after the First World War, there were neither the people to run it, and there were trains, and there were cars, and people could come and go. So that's why half the house hadn't been used for 50 years, and because it simply wasn't always required. And anyway, it was so cold, people steered clear of it if they could.
Well, I imagine after a while it became a nice place to be invited to, but in the end you probably dreaded it because, like you say, it was very cold. I gather there were only 3 bathrooms for a very long time, and all sorts of ceilings were falling in. And unfortunately, that's what happens to a very big old house unless you can pump money in.
Yes, well, we did it bit by bit. We had one evening when we had a dinner party, and we don't often do black tie dinners. And I think we did it because we'd moved back into Colebrook, and this was wonderful. And we just thought we'd do it for the crack of it. And there was a terrible storm, and we had to get all the men in their black ties. We had to go upstairs to the top floor. We then had to go up 2 ladders and onto the roof. And we then had to carry breeze blocks up. We carried 40 breeze blocks up and put them on the roof to hold down a flat roof, which was a copper roof. And it actually worked, and we did it. And by now, present day, through 1 or 2 storms and other things, we've actually got a solid roof, which is really rather nice because when you hear it raining, you're not petrified and running around the place waiting for something to happen.
And that happened in the middle of a black tie dinner.
Yes, it was. But I mean, it was our sort of a black tie dinner. You needn't worry. It wasn't the most formal thing in the world. But yes, it was. And the shirts weren't so white at the end of it.
And what about...
And everybody was drenched.
Everybody was drenched there, but I know that there are some parts that are originals. I mean, there is some original wallpaper still there.
Yes, we kept it. There was only one room we couldn't keep it in, the dining room, because it's got 3 outside walls and it was very damp, and it was always that way, I think. But in every other room, we either kept the wallpaper or we kept a little block of it. In the rooms, there's about 6 foot by 4 foot in some of the rooms. So we've got the old wallpaper, but there was too much of it, too ruined, and it was impossible to keep it.
Nevertheless, I think, I don't know whether it's you or Janet, your lovely wife, who is clearly an expert in managing to salvage some of the old and then put on that a sort of new feel, but a very country feel. And the colour schemes are gorgeous. We've got some more video which we can look at. Well, you can explain to us who did all the brain work behind the decor, and how did you manage it? Sorry, we're just seeing a video here. No, we're going to the right video now, of the interior, the most beautiful colour schemes, and the work on the ceilings as well, and the chandeliers. Who was the brains behind that? Is it both of you, or Janet, or who?
No, it's Janet, really. She worked for Sotheby's before we were married, and when we got married, they said she could no longer work for them because they realised that she had a job to do at Coburg. So she planned all of that and planned the curtains and everything else. So the ceilings and things, a lot of them are smoke damaged. I can't see the bit of film you're seeing at all, but the ceilings, they are quite light coloured, but the centre and the mouldings around the side are quite dark because they're all smoke damaged over 150 years, and we couldn't afford to paint them properly and to gild them. So we painted the flat surfaces, and we went out to the woods, literally to the Sitka spruce wood, and we cut Sitka spruce trees, and we made some scaffolding, and we painted the flat surfaces. And I was going to paint a bit, but I painted our bedroom and bathroom, and we had an old boy who'd looked after all the slates in Coburg for years. And when he came, he wouldn't look at it while I was doing it. And I said, "Come on, Jim, you've got to have a look at it." And he came in, and he had a mate called Jerry, who's still with me today. And he said, Jerry, come and look at this." And Jerry came in, and Jim said, "You'd never paint the ceiling gloss, would you?" Turned around and walked out. And that was the last thing I was ever allowed to paint. So they did on standing on fir trees and whatever. But it was quite an enterprise.
I have to say the standout thing, which I love so much, is the staircase. And I gather that is original. It's absolutely beautiful.
All of the fittings, all of the wall fittings and everything else are original. The fireplace and everything.
And the staircase, the way it sweeps up, and the flying bird above that. Who thought of that?
Well, that is, and I'm having a mental blank. That is I'm having a mental blank. The bird that dives into the sea to catch fish at high speed.
Oh, a tern, not a tern.
It's a white and yellow bird. I'm having a gannet. No, not a gannet. Sorry.
Not a gannet. No, it's the tip of my tongue too. Somebody will ring in with but that's what it's meant to be. It's one of those ones that dies.
Maybe Janet will come in and tell me. I'm being stupid, but it is speckled like a cuckoo-moran hen, and it was extraordinary, and it was blown in, and it came here, and it died, and it was a gannet. And they when they're young, they're speckled and dark, and they have this most wonderful design of white spots and things over their wings. And it died here because it got blown away from the coast. And when we found it, we thought we can't throw it in the bin. So I got it stuffed, and then I hang it halfway up the stairs so that you can actually walk up the stairs and look down at it as well.
Yeah, I can.
It worked very well. I don't like stuffed animals all over the place, but that worked well.
No, I quite agree with you. I don't like stuffed animals very much, but there it has a drama. It has something to say. It has a story to it, and it belongs. It is absolutely stunning. Go on.
And also, only keep that colour for 4 years, and they don't come back to the gannet colony during that time. So you don't see them. So we didn't have a clue what it was. And we were frantically ringing up everybody saying, what is it? And that was why I lost the name for a minute, but it's a gannet, don't worry.
No, I love it. It belongs. I think that's the main thing, isn't it? So,
yes.
Well, before we tell everybody watching at the moment how one day they may be actually be able to come and stay, perhaps as an extension to a Viking cruise, let's find out more about you if we can. Now, everything is, the house, for instance, itself is called Colebrook Park. Why is it called that?
Because a Brooke married a Cole, and the Brookes are not very imaginative, so they just put the two names together. And the Coles, although this wasn't a direct, it was a cousin of them, the Coles are the Earl of Inniskilling's family, which is just down the road from us. So they didn't go very far, and they married a Cole, and they just called it Colebrook.
It sounds nice, though, doesn't it? Your coat of arms, well, we're going to look at it now. Yeah. How old is that coat of arms, and what does it signify?
Right. Well, there's a medal, which is a red and blue cross on a mustard background. That, I'm told, that is really quite old. And the Brookes were originally called de Brock, and they came from Normandy. Probably sometimes after William the Conqueror, because there was no point in coming to fight if you didn't have to. And Brock, they were of Brock, de Brock. And Brock in Normandy was colloquial language for a stream by chance. They then came to Great Britain, and of course they wouldn't go on with the French name forever, but a Brock in Celtic is a badger. So we have a badger as a family crest, and the name gradually became Brooke. So on the top, there's a badger. Yes. And then below that helmet, below that, there is a Viscount's coronet. And then on either side of the coat of arms, there is a dolphin on the left for my grandmother and a lion on the right. And then around the shield is the garter, which is the garter motto, which is Honneur soit qui mal y pense, which is shame on him who thinks evil of it. That is the circle around it. And then underneath that, in the bottom corner, there is a St. John cross, and our motto, which is Gloria Finis, glory to the end. And that is the coat of arms. And incidentally, it's a bit of trivia. The shield and so on was the flag of a place called Sarawak in Borneo, because there were people called the White Rajas of Sarawak, and they were Brookes, and they ruled Sarawak from 1842 to 1947. So that was the flag, and it's now slightly different, but that's trivia, sorry.
No, but it's important trivia, and it's a wonderful, it's a very colourful coat of arms, and it's lovely to know the meaning behind it. And you have so many titles. First of all, we need to explain to everybody you sit in the House of Lords, and that of course is even after hereditary peers were, as it were, abolished. We've got a lovely picture of you here sitting in your in all your magnificence in the House of Lords. Why did you decide to try and remain in the House of Lords? Did it mean that you had to then be elected?
Well, there was an issue with it, because I went there originally because my father was there. And apart from anything else, my mother said, when are you going to go? And I thought all I had to do was go and knock on the door and say, boys, I'm here. But not at all. They sent me a form which said, I am the son of so-and-so. Here is their marriage certificate and goodness knows what. When I sent it to them, they sent it back corrected, like a school essay in red. I am the first son, and so on and so forth. So I did go. Whereupon, actually, my mother said, I don't know why you're in such a hurry. After, my father died, and I thought, well, I better do it because she said it. And then we had the cull of the hereditary peers in 97 or 99. and each grouping, and there was basically Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, Liberal Democrats, and crossbench, voted in a tenth of their hereditary peers. So there would be 1/10 of them left. And they were actually as a hostage to further reform, because everybody's always talking about reforming Parliament in whatever way. And so we were left with 96 peers, which was 75, the 1/10 of the total of 750, plus a few others which had posts, and that brought it up to 92. So each grouping voted theirs in, and that was that. But now, of course, and that was a Labour policy, they then said, well, what happens if people die? So they said, okay, the next one will come in, but that'll only last for 2 or 3 years, because by then we'll have reformed it. But they didn't reform it. Right. So every time one dies, the grouping that person came from, the number of peers there, vote in a new one from outside, somewhere around the country, a new hereditary peer. And that's the way it goes on at the moment.
And so that is why you sit in the House of Lords now, if and when you want to.
Yes, and really it was more a matter of not taking one's name out. I didn't think I would stay in. I didn't think that I would be voted in, but it wasn't really an election, because people knew you, they knew what you did and whatever. And I was just lucky, and I think I've had a life of luck, and that's really it. I was quite young compared with some, and secondly, I came from Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland was a very usual topic, a very frequent topic, because of the Troubles. Secondly, I was the only serving soldier in Northern Ireland. Thirdly, because it came up so often, it came up more often than if I'd been a space scientist. Space probably comes up once every couple of years. So people didn't know you, and it wasn't a matter of wanting to be known. It was just the fact that if you were there and you speak on things you know about, not things you're lobbied about. And so you just speak. And so you're speaking more often. Plus the fact that when I got there, my father had been on EU committees, House of Lords EU committees, and they very kindly thought he may be a chip off the old block. They were going to learn soon that wasn't quite true, but we'll invite him onto a committee. So I was on EU committees. I'd been on EU committees. You go on them and roll off after 4 years for a year. And I've been on them for a total of about 22 years. And so you were just there taking part. And lo and behold, we were shooting that day, or we were way out around the countryside with a group of friends. We came back at lunchtime and Janet said, "You're not going to believe it. You've been voted in." Well, I couldn't believe it. Neither could anybody else. But that's the way it was.
Important though, because it's who you represent and the area of the country that you represent. You are also a Knight of the Garter. Now, anyone British watching this right now will know that that is a really extraordinary thing. It's the most exclusive order there is, I think, actually, and only awarded to a very, very few. So for the benefit of people who are watching from all over the world, can you explain what being a Knight of the Garter is all about? We're looking at some wonderful pictures of you in the Windsor Parade.
Well, the first thing is that it comes, I think it's the same for everybody, it comes at a colossal shock when you're told that the Queen wants to make you a Knight of the Garter, wants to appoint you, because I suspect, I mean, I was in the army, and it's a lovely idea to get a military cross. It's a brilliant award, and you'll be quite brave and whatever. But you don't normally either think or otherwise, what about a VC? Because most, dare I say it, VCs very sadly are dead. So you don't think about that. And I never really thought about an honour anyway, but nobody thinks about Knight of the Garter because it's so unusual. And then suddenly, bang, and you're asked, and you just can't believe it, and that's it. But the Garter was started in 1348 by Edward III, and he had been rather successful, among other things, the Battle of Crecy in 1346. And there are various stories as to how it came to be the Garter, in that he wanted to select out of all his knights, special knights, and one of the ideas might have been to give them something around their waist even. But there's a slightly more colourful one too, which is that one of the popular ones involves the Countess of Salisbury, whose garter is said to have slipped from her leg while she was dancing at a court ball in Calais. Because remember, Edward was conquering France. Yes. When the surrounding court sniggered, the king picked it up and returned it to her, exclaiming, "Honi soit qui mal y pense." Shame on him who thinks ill of it. The phrase has become the motto of the order. But the motto, in fact, refers to Edward's claim to the French throne. And it is the oldest, most continuous order of chivalry in the world. And the Queen and certain members of the royal family are members of it. But there are 24 knights, basically from the United Kingdom, up to 24. We're 22 at the moment, because obviously one or two of the older people die, and that no more are appointed before another Garter Day, which is in early June. And it is all associated with King George. And therefore they are announced on April the 23rd, George's Day. But this year, because of Corona, there were no announcements and no Garter Day and no investiture. And what happens is that on Garter Day, there is an investiture in the morning if necessary, but there is a meeting in the morning. We then all have lunch in Windsor Castle with the members of the royal family who are there. And in the afternoon, we parade down from Windsor Castle to St George's Chapel, which is where, when we're appointed, each of our banners is hanging above a seat with our banner, and then with a badger on the top of the helmet, and there is a plaque on the wall behind your seat. So it's very special indeed, and it's just amazing. And if I think of it and where I come from, County Fermanagh, with Colebrook, I still cannot really believe it, and that's the truth. But it is just fantastic.
I think that must be. You must feel you are part of history. It's a bit like being a Knight of the Round Table, isn't it, really? I gather Winston Churchill was a Knight of the Garter, wasn't he? I think Margaret Thatcher was as well, wasn't she?
Yes, Margaret Thatcher, and some prime ministers, some head of the armed services, and my, well, you may be coming on to it, but my great uncle Alan Brooke, the Field Marshal, he was a Knight of the Garter, and my grandfather was a Knight of the Garter as well. And after you die, you're back, come back to your church or to wherever you want to put them. And one day we were in our church here, and there are 3 banners there already, because one of them is for the Order of the Bath for Alan Brooke. And a man who was in there said, "Well, isn't it great? You're a Knight of the Garter. You'll soon have your banner up there." And I said, "Then you know I'm dead." And the poor man was absolutely horrified. But that's, anyway, it is an amazing thing.
No, I mean, it is incredibly special. And you are the Knight of St John as well. Now, that sounds very ancient. What's that about?
Knight of St John is 11th century. Although, no, the Order of St John is from the 11th century. And it was originally not really an order. It was a hospital in Jerusalem. From the Crusades and whatever, and it was a Christian hospital. It then became an order of chivalry in the 19th century. So it's the Queen's involved, and she's the sovereign head. Yeah. And there is a ceremonial order to it. And I am what's called the Knight Commander of the Ards Commandery, which is in Northern Ireland. But it is worldwide. There are 250,000 people working, and many of them volunteers. And what it really ends up on the ground is supporting people who are not well, and being a first aid organisation, and the Eye Hospital in Jerusalem. And it's a St John Hospital. And that is very important because in Palestine, genetically, the people have a serious eye defect. And it has worked with outposts in Palestine throughout all the years of these troubles. And there are a lot of volunteers there, but there are also serious professionals who do time out from hospitals all over the world to go and do it. And it is very special indeed. In America, there are, I think, about 1,500 members of it. There's a priory in America. They have raised over $20 million since it was started in America, which I think was about 1980 or something. And it is, for instance, in Northern Ireland, the ambulances, St John Ambulance, and in England to a certain extent, St John Ambulance are manned by volunteers. And without St John Ambulance, we would have no local football matches. We'd have no TT races for the road racing. We would have a lot of trouble with rugby matches. And these are all totally volunteer people who do the training, man the ambulances. And in COVID, and we're only a small place, we're the size of Yorkshire, they did 18 ambulances every day to support the ambulance service. And every single one of them was a volunteer. And you see them at events, and we had horses as a family business. You see them at a horse show or an event in the rain, probably, sheltering under a bush. And nobody appreciates what they really are until wee Jimmy breaks his leg. And then they're on the spot.
Yes, then and you need.
It is. I'm very proud to be part of it. I've done precious little for it. I'm really proud because of what they do.
Well, you've just waved their flag yet again. Now, I want to ask you about being a Lord in Waiting to the Queen, because I didn't even know there were Lord in Waiting. And you're not just an ordinary Lord in Waiting, you are a hand-picked one. What is that, and what are your duties? What do you have to do?
Well, I'm a personal Lord in Waiting, and there are two of us chosen by the Queen. And again, I had no idea about anything at all until I was asked to go to breakfast with somebody in the Cavalry Club in London. He said, will you come and have breakfast with me? I've got something to ask you. And he worked in the Royal Household. And he said, will you be a Lord in Waiting? And I said, what on earth is that? And actually, at the time, I was a Conservative, basically, because my father was. And then, at the last minute of accepting, I had to become a crossbencher because the household is apolitical and whatever. And I said, what do I do? And they said, well, you represent the Queen, and there are state visits, things like that. So we are not like a lady in waiting in drag. We don't carry handbags, and we don't, we would if there was nobody else around, but we do not take the flowers for it. We represent her. We don't go abroad because when she's abroad, she's representing herself. So when there's an inward state visit, for example, we meet the person the night before at the airport, wherever they arrive. We travel in with them, normally in their car with them, to wherever they're staying the night before state visit. And then we go to every event, but the Queen is only at the arrival ceremony, the arrivals lunch, which is a very closed little lunch, just for the two suites and the people who accompany, which is for about 60 people. And then at the state banquet. So we take them as their travelling companion. We travel, well, normally we use the Queen's Red Bentley. We travel accompanying them to everywhere they go. And we take them to where we're going, and then we hand them over to whoever is actually doing the visit at that place. And I think it's quite clever in a way, because in some countries, the head of state accompanies the visiting head of state. Now that causes quite a problem, because they have to sit next to each other protocol-wise, wherever they are. So they'll be sitting next to each other for 3 or 4 days. So that's not a good idea. So the Lord in Waiting takes them, and when he gets to a place, like a factory or like a conference or like a school or whatever, you immediately take a slightly back seat, and you're always there to help them, because actually you spend more time with them than anybody else. So you're always there to help, but you take a back seat. And then the hosts do not have to worry about how to entertain another royal, because you're not royal the moment you step out of the car. Yes. And we look up.
Yeah. So who have you done that with? Visiting heads of state, American presidents?
Yes, I've done it with Obama and with the current president. But America's slightly different, because you don't actually travel in the car, because they have this, dare I say, wretched beast, the big black car. And yeah, we're allowed close to them, but not right at them. But they have always been fantastic people, and the people who come with them have always been fantastic. So I did Obama, and then recently I did President Trump. And they were the whole family were here, most of the family, and Ivanka and Jared in particular were absolutely charming and great fun and very relaxed throughout and were great. And then I've done it for 22 years. So I've done the Emperor and Empress of Japan. I've done Hungary, Poland, South Africa twice. And I also did Putin when he was first on the Charm Offensive. And I traveled with him for 3 days. The Duke of York and myself flew to Edinburgh on his illusion. I went on a Russian warship with him and took him to other places. And they're always fascinating. That you pitch yourself because you come out of Fermanagh and lambing sheep or cutting down trees or doing whatever, and you go there and suddenly you're in a totally different world. And there's that moment when you stand at the bottom of the steps of an aircraft waiting for that head of state to come down, thinking rather nervously, almost as nervous as this interview, you think, oh my goodness, what's it going to be like? Is it going to be good? And they come down and they're always very special people. I think what you do learn is that every head of state, no matter whether you disagree with their policies personally, because we're being apolitical, no matter what you think, they all have charisma, every single one of them. Amazing charisma and presence, and otherwise they wouldn't be there. So they're fascinating people because we're being apolitical, and they're amusing too. They are amusing, good fun, and they talk about Ireland, they talk about where you come from because they know, they talk about their own countries, they talk about their families, and you're just their traveling companion, which is really, it's amazing. You just pinch yourself. And with Becky, he'd been warned, not really warned, he's a nice man, but we've been warned, he's quite quiet, he's an academic, so don't expect to have a really exciting time. He came down the steps, and the last 2 or 3 steps he almost ran down, and he grabbed my hand and he said, before I could even say, on behalf of the Queen, I welcome you, he said, how really nice to meet you. Let's go. This is a wonderful, and we had a fantastic time. And it's the same with them all.
I agree with you. You don't have to even have an opinion about their politics, but usually people like that have gotten to the place they are because they have something special, and it is fascinating to meet them sometimes. I've got a couple of pictures of you at Enniskillen making a speech. I think that was on behalf of the Queen, wasn't it? Or was that which role were you in when you were making those speeches at Enniskillen, for instance?
Oh, I think that I'm Her Majesty's Lord Lieutenant for County Fermanagh, which means that in addition to being Lord in Waiting, which is totally separate, when I represent the Queen in County Fermanagh, and when a member of the royal family comes here, then we are always present, or one of our deputies is present. And because we represent her at things like remembrance services, or at something that's official that we've been invited to, that we think we should represent the Queen, because she can't be everywhere, and neither can members of the royal family, then we represent the Queen, and we are automatically playing the Queen, if you like, on that occasion.
Yeah. Yes.
And I
got another lovely picture of you with the Queen of Spain, and again, you're doing your role as representing the Queen at that particular moment. My goodness, what a glamour!
Well, she's absolutely lovely. They were lovely. You're meant to really keep out of the photographs. But what happened there was that she's a lovely person. She was a journalist previously, and she was very, very conscious that she was in a role that she hadn't been used to and whatever. And in the car, we were talking about things, and she said, oh, when I get out of the car. And I said, she wasn't wearing a low-cut dress, I don't mean that. But getting out of the car, apparently for women, is very inelegant. And at the Guildhall banquet, she would have been getting out straight in the cameras. So I said, on the way to it, I said, listen, madam, why don't you and I get out the other side, away from the cameras? Everybody will be very surprised, but don't worry about that. You will then be able to stand up, and we can walk around the back. So we were walking around the back and I was pointing her in the right direction. And that is why we were photographed together. And what was quite funny was on the way back from the Guildhall in the car, she said, "Look, I already have a photograph of us." So,
it's lovely that you thought of that, because that really is one of the worst moments for a lady getting out of the car, and all of the cameras are flashing, and it's very, very difficult to look elegant at that point. Got some more pictures of you, I think, at a Remembrance Sunday service. You were speaking in a church there. I'm not sure where that is, but clearly that's one of those very...
In Enniskillen, because after the Enniskillen bomb, we always had a big remembrance, but after the Enniskillen bomb, it became even bigger. And lately, since the 25th anniversary of the Enniskillen bomb, we also have the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland. He comes up, and we get representatives of everywhere. And so it's always a big thing.
Always huge, absolutely. And we've got lots of pictures of you with veterans as well, because you do a lot of work with vets, don't you?
Well,
lovely.
The veterans of the military forces, of the armed forces, are very important. And what has come out is that, and this is throughout, in America, in Denmark, in Germany, in Holland, and in Great Britain, that if you like, the first response people, military and others like police and whatever, somewhere around 6 to 7% have not big mental illness, but mental issues. From operational, for the military, 17% have these issues. And we're only just beginning to realize, in fact, the first people to realize were the police force here throughout 40 years of trouble. And the first time that the armed forces really realized was the first Gulf War. But now they're looking at it much more. And we've got a charity based here, which is not run by us. They are based at my home because we were involved throughout the Troubles with all our own veterans, and my wife Janet looked after our widows from the armed forces who were killed by their husbands or wives were killed by terrorists. So we've always been involved, and we have this charity that works here with horticultural therapy, and they have psychotherapists, counsellors, and whatever. And one of the first courses of them that came in, unbeknownst to everybody, there were 2 failed suicides, people who'd failed previously. So it's really serious stuff. And we have a scheme called the Defence Garden Scheme. And there was a lady called Sally Coulthard who did a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship. And she went to Denmark and America. And in America, she went to 1 or 2 significant places. She got an extraordinary amount of help. She went and saw the Green Road, which is in a project in the Walter Reed National Military Hospital in Washington. And that is a road between the accommodation, or a track between the accommodation and the college and the hospital. And it's laid out specifically for them to have outdoor horticultural therapy en route. And she also went to the University of Tennessee, and she met a veteran who was running things in the Chicago Botanic Garden. And he said, it's therapy without labels, and we don't do labels. And then a particular thing, I asked her what we were really learning from it. She said, loss of identity on transition, nature-based therapy and important support, equally applicable to transition stress when people come out of the army or out of the armed forces. So it's not necessarily caused by combat. And it's particularly appropriate with horticulture, because there is a parallel between all sorts of doors, land-based, which is the growing and the planting and seeing things materialize. And it's really about giving people a different experience and taking their minds off what is troubling. So the veterans are a very, very important part of our lives.
And that is such a wonderful work. I know that I've had personal experience of horticulture. I never put it that way, horticultural therapy, but learning to grow things and nurturing things and watching them grow is so good for the human spirit. We need to get back to that. We need to learn it more, don't we?
Well, it's quite an interesting one too, because the Japanese have come up with forest bathing. And forest bathing, I won't tell you what I thought it was when I first looked at it. I thought it was a naturist society and whatever up in the woods. No, it's quite interesting because the Japanese actually give it on prescription with their doctors. But what it actually, we discovered, is exactly what we do when we're culling deer. Because we go out and we have to move very, very quietly, or we frighten them. And we sit down for ages. And you see the birds and the bees and the red squirrels. And you see a spider making a web and whatever. And you see the plants. And you can hear the water of the river, because we have 3 miles of river running through the place. And it is really significant because it really does have a sort of calming effect. And so we're going down more of that line because it's so effective and it's been shown. And, you know, we don't just have the veterans themselves, we've got their families. And you may be aware that our First Minister is called Arlene Foster, and she was on a school bus when it was blown up. Luckily, she wasn't injured in practical terms. But one of my other soldiers' daughters nearly lost her up. But one of my soldiers was driving, and they put the bomb on the other side of the engine block because he didn't always search there, and they always watched it. And he and his son used to search the bus. And that morning, his son searched most of the bus, and he went in to pick up something, and he came out and he got in, and he picked up the children, and it blew up, and he was quite seriously injured. But the son, a year later, committed suicide because he hadn't searched the bus properly. And so it's not worse. It's a little bit different from those who have been to Afghanistan. Their families worry and their families are under incredible stress. But in Northern Ireland, we have 50 armed services, home service veterans, 50,000 police, and every single one of their families was under threat every day. And so you've got to bring the family with you. And what you can't do is take somebody out, give them a bit of therapy in a room, and send them back to the environment where the problem is. So you have to ensure that the family understand that they're not having a day out in a sunny garden for no reason. And when they come back, the wife wonders, hey, why don't you repair my washing machine? He says, I'm tired. She said, you've had a day off. No, we've got to bring them together and treat everybody. So it's fascinating, but it's horrifying too.
Yes, fascinating, horrifying. There's such a lot of healing to be done, and we've got to learn how to do it efficiently as well, haven't we, for everybody? It's fascinating that you are doing that, though, and you clearly believe in it so fervently. I just wanted to show a bit of video of the lighting of the beacon, because when we celebrated the Queen's 90th birthday, wasn't it? We lit beacons throughout the whole land. And I love the history of beacons, and you must have been very proud. Now, where were you when you lit this beacon?
Outside the cathedral in Enniskillen, which is directly opposite the Roman Catholic St. Michael's Church. And this is very significant because you may have been aware of it, but in 2012, the Queen walked across the road from the cathedral to the Roman Catholic Church. Now, you've got to remember how our society is divided. Most Protestants would never go into the Catholic Church, and most Catholics would never go into the Protestant Church. Since that date, we have had Remembrance Sunday services, end of World War I. We were going to have VJ service only in the Catholic Church. And it is, I think, unique in Northern Ireland. There is no other Catholic church in Northern Ireland where we've had armed services, remembrance services. And that is down to two people, somebody called Canon Kenny Hall and Monsignor Peter O'Reilly. And the funny thing is their houses are across the road. The Queen walked across, and somebody said she even crossed the double yellow line to get there. But their two houses are on opposite corners of this cross. And I think they have a tunnel underneath, and they have a gate, and they do planning there. Because we have internal dissident terrorists, and we still have some. And it was the third most troublesome rural area in Northern Ireland after South Armagh, which you'll know about, and East Tyrone that was called Murder Trauma. And although we still have some, we have the most extraordinary coming together. And this was the influence of our Queen, who has been there so long, who does the right thing at the right time. And she is amazing.
She has been incredible, and given that she's lost her own very dear relatives during the Troubles, given their history that she has overseen, she has also now participated so much in, I don't know, just trying to heal the wounds in Ireland. She's met people that you'd never have dreamt 30, 20 years ago she would ever meet and shake hands with, but she's done it. And she's still, what she does still has the most tremendous effect, doesn't it?
Well, she has this extraordinary thing in whatever part of the world she's in, or whatever part of life she's in. And, you know, when she went to the Republic of Ireland and she went into the racing stable, normally when we go on, and I don't go on that visit, but normally when we're on state visits into the country, into England, or she's away, there are people around you, and it's all been formed and pushed and tailored. She just simply took off and talked to the grooms because she can. And another example, which I think is a lovely one, and it did happen, was she holds these lunches where she has 6 or 8 people in the autumn to a series of lunches. And on one occasion, she had a veteran, and it could have been Afghanistan or Iraq, and he was slightly mentally stressed. And a lot of us are quite stressed when we meet the Queen first anyway. And he was sitting beside her, and he was virtually tongue-tied, and she was having trouble opening the conversation. And of course, the corgis, dogs, are always around there somewhere. And she called one of the corgis up, and she started talking to him, talked to him. That was it. That was it. The whole thing opened up. And that is, she is just so special, and, you know, an amazing person, you know. And after I had throat cancer, the first state visit I went back to do at the arrivals lunch, when everybody was there and there was plenty for her, far more important people than me, she came straight across at the reception and she said, "How are you? It's so good to see you back. I'm so sorry. Was it terrible?" You know, it wouldn't matter whether you raked the gravel. She is conscious of everybody and everything that goes on. And don't think you know something she doesn't. You don't.
And I mean, I know we've also seen lovely pictures of you in the carriage with her at Ascot. So is that a sort of way of saying thank you? Occasionally you do get invited along to events where you're not on duty. You are just there as guests, and it's lovely.
Yeah, we were there as guests, and we stayed in Windsor, and then you go in the carriage procession, and when you're there, on your dressing table is put various things for the day, and it's just information that actually it's quite nice to know. And one of them is the carriages, and I started at carriage 4 because I'm really not important at all. I started carriage 4 and I didn't see my name. I went up to 3, I went up to 2, and I saw Janet's name, and I thought, oh well, she's going in it. This is my time for not going in a carriage. And then I happened to look at carriage 1 and thought, holy smoke, there I am. And I was in the carriage with Prince of Wales and everything. And I think one of the photographs you had was the Prince of Wales and me looking at something and rather laughing. That was because when we came through the tunnel into the parade ring behind, or the winner's enclosure, as we came through, somebody must have recognized me, somebody from Fermanagh, because there was suddenly a shout of, "Up Fermanagh!" Since I live in Fermanagh. And the Prince of Wales went like that. He said, "What's that?" So I said, "Don't worry, sir. They all recognize you." So I had to bring 1 or 2 who recognized me as well. And we were just laughing about it, you know.
But it's lovely. I mean,
it's one of the carriage procession in state visits, carriage processions going up the Mall, and of course Ascot is something very, very special indeed. Even if you're not a racing man like me, although my wife keeps me right because she understands.
You're not. You come from Northern Ireland and you have that beautiful estate, and you're not a horseman?
No, we were eventing and show jumping. And my mother was a bit of a tyrant, and you know, even when we got back from school, we had to be up at 6:30 to groom our ponies, on our breakfast 8 o'clock, and if we were late, it was terrible. 9 o'clock, we had to be on our first horse. But we started with show jumping, and she taught us, and she taught my father up to, he was shortlisted for the British Olympic team in the 50s. And then we turned to eventing in the late 60s, and then we evented, and my brother was junior European champion, and my next 2 sisters were both in the British team. So horses were very much a part of our lives.
Yes, yes. In fact, we've had a question. Sorry, I was going to say we've had a question from Ori in Fort Collins, who says, "Do you have any livestock on the estate?" Thank you so much for sharing your home with us. But yes, you do have livestock on the estate, don't you?
Yes, we do. We've got. We don't do a lot of farming now because when we came back to Colebrook, everything was sold for the death duties. All the milking machines were sold, all the grapes, all the tractors, all the animals, and the buildings have been left for 7 years until they were falling down. Nobody had done anything to them. So we've got some sheep. I used to have 400 calves, and then we had 300 ewes for lambing. And now, because I had somebody who was able to help me and do some of that at night, can no longer do it, we don't lamb them, and we have some sheep. And we let a lot of the rest of the land, but then we have forestry as well. So we do have animals. I couldn't live without them, and it's a reason to get up in the morning. And we have 2 horses, 2 mares, which occasionally have bred foals, and that's been fun too. But I think horses have been a prime thing, and it's quite interesting if you think of it. It's the only sport where 2 unpredictable animals have to agree to do the same thing at the same time. And sometimes you see when they don't agree, and then there's a jumping big. But if you think of football, if you think of skiing, if you think of high jumping, you're always dealing with an inert object. But for horses, you've got to agree with the horse that you're going to jump that fence in that row. So it's a different cup of tea.
And that's why it is such poetry when you see the 2 absolutely getting it right together. Does the Lord, Alana says in New Jersey, hi Alana, she says, does the Lord also speak with an Irish accent, or was it such that landowners always spoke the Queen's English? So yes, you're Irish, you're living in this beautiful estate, but you don't sound Irish.
Well, I'll tell you,
that?
I'll tell you a story. We can do, and we often slip into it. And once when I was young, the telephone rang at our home at Ashcombe, and this voice said, "Can I speak to Captain John?" And I said, well, who was speaking? And he said, "Oh, well, the name's Willie something, and I just wish to speak to Captain John." And we'd learned not to always put him on to my father, but to take messages. We were always told, take a message. And I said, "Well, can I help you?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what it is. Do you know something? Did you see all them planes buzzing round and round the day?" And I said, "Well, it was clear day." And I said, "Well, yes, I had seen aeroplanes passing him." He said, "Do you know what they were?" So I said, "Well, they were going probably to America or something like that." He said, "You know, they weren't at all. I'm farming land here, and we've got good weather, and I want to get the harvest in. And you know what they do? They make them planes go and buzzing round and round and round. Do you see the clouds they make? And then we get wet and we don't get the harvest." And that is a true story. So I had to relate this story. So we can speak in an Irish accent when we hear
it. Tori from Udine asks, and this is a question I wanted to ask you, that obviously you talked about how difficult it was to do up Colebrook Park and to make it a working business. And of course, we've been going through this terrible pandemic. Tori says, how have you been affected by COVID? And how has Ireland generally handled this dreadful crisis? And when might you look forward to getting back to normal, I suppose?
Well, I think we look forward to it very much, like everybody else. And first of all, I mean, it's interesting because other businesses, my brother, Christopher, inherited Galgorm Castle, which was a shell, and exactly like Colebrook, no money, no whatever. 23 years ago, he developed a golf course, and it is just coming good. I mean, some of the golf courses which were developed before the recession went broke, and they always say the quickest way to own a golf course is to wait for one to go broke and then buy it. But he has developed in 23 years, and this year, in a few weeks' time, they're doing the Irish Open, and that is a very big thing. But they are having to cope with the COVID, and of course it's going to be a different sort of competition. And it's only about 20 miles from Belfast, So actually, should the cruise liners come in, that's a good destination. From our point of view at Colebrook, it's a problem because a lot of our deer shooting people come from Scandinavia and Germany and whatever. We have had Americans and we're very happy with them, but they've got to come along the way. And the problem is that there are very few direct flights. And the only people who are flying direct flights into Dublin from Scandinavia is Ryanair. And Ryanair are the only airline that don't take guns. So we're really, our winter business is in a very bad way. And I'm not, but this is hitting lots of people. And what we're doing is we're just going to survive this year. This is 1 year of our life, 1 year of everything. And in years to come, people are going to say, what did you do in COVID? Or how did you survive COVID? And it is a bit of a lockdown. And there are businesses that are seriously going broke and that can't survive. And there are also, dare one say, there are charities. And these big charities that have overheads, but do great work. And we've got to remember that the state, the country actually has government departments to do things. But we all know that the state relies on a lot of charity. And it is a big problem because where they have overheads. Now, one of the particular things is that, of course, we've got volunteers. And volunteers, it's quite interesting. In the UK, there are 16 to 18 million volunteers. And that takes everything from out of school hours to local football clubs, to churches, to first aid, to St. John, whatever. And this is a big, big problem while COVID is having this effect. And I think that what our government has done, I don't mean in supporting businesses and supporting charities, has been quite staggering. And they gave 750 million to support frontline charities involved in COVID in April, I think on April the 8th. And Northern Ireland got a portion and other people. But it's so terribly important because charities and volunteers are a key to our society.
Absolutely. And I think it's only during this year when so many have had to shut down that we've actually started to understand what they do, and we've missed them so badly. And as you say, maybe this year is a year that we just have to survive until maybe we get a vaccine, or at least we get better ways of coping. And we've all just got to, work together. I could talk to you all evening, and I don't think I'm allowed to. But one day, I think everybody's hoping that when we are able to travel again, that maybe at the beginning or end of a Viking cruise, there may be a way that some Viking visitors will be able to come along to Colebrook Park and meet you and see what the place has to offer. Because, as I said, I used the word divine earlier, and that's the only word I can think of. I think you and your lovely wife, Janet, who one day I hope I'll meet, you've done just the most fantastic job on the house, and you must be so proud of it. And you must be so looking forward to actually welcoming people again and showing them round and having them stay.
Well, it's always the thing. You're always wondering what they're going to be like before they arrive, if you haven't met them before. But we've got most of our groups come back for 20 years running. So it's not, but this is this horrible thing of being like a Jack Russell Terrier with your face looking out of the window, waiting for them to arrive and thinking, oh my goodness, what is it? What are they going to be like? But invariably, they know what to expect, and they know that I'm not going to polish their shoes, and I'll most certainly find them the polish. And they know that they're going to join in family life, and they're coming to one of the beautiful parts of the United Kingdom, the home of the Game of Thrones and various other things, let alone that. And it is truly beautiful, and it's underpopulated compared with other areas. 30% of Fermanagh is lakes, and we're within 40 minutes of the West Coast. Next stop, America.
Yes, literally, absolutely, famous for that, of course. Well, look, I'm going to love you and leave you now because we're well out of time. There was so much more to talk about, But like I say, that is maybe for another day when we can meet in person, and maybe people who are watching right now from all over the world will be able to hopefully come and visit you and meet you in person and learn all about your amazing family and that amazing Colebrook Park, and experiencing the hunting, shooting and fishing and just the general hospitality of what you have to offer. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have enjoyed it, and thank you for making it easier than I thought it could possibly be. I've been living in terror for the last few days, but no, yeah, it's been very kind of you, and
that's lovely. In fact, just finally, Noel from Oakbrook has quickly emailed and said, we think that is a northern gannet. So he was right, probably before you. But so many people have got in touch saying they found you absolutely a fascinating interview and want to come and see Colebrook for themselves. So that's a good sign, isn't it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank Viking Cruises very much. You never know, one day I might actually want to go on one. I'm
sure you love them.
A bit alien.
Absolutely. And please give our love to Janet, because I think she's done a sterling job as well. I gather she does a lot of sterling job behind the scenes. But thank you very, very much for joining us. And like I say, one day we will meet in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And let me tell you, next week, I'm going to be introducing you to Mick Dawson, who's a former Royal Marines commando, gained renown as a record-breaking ocean rower. He's rowed across the Atlantic Ocean twice and holds a Guinness World Record for skippering the first and only rowboat to cross the North Pacific Ocean from Japan to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And on that journey, I'm told he braved typhoons, collision, sharks and killer whales, and he still rowed 4,500 miles across the North Pacific. On day 109, disaster struck. He was capsized by a freak wave and trapped inside the sinking cabin. Now, how he got out, I don't know yet, because I haven't finished that part of the book. But next week, he'll tell us. Until then, do keep safe and well. Au revoir and goodbye.